it's only fair that if I'm going to criticize this bill, that I actually read the bill, which I have, and I give a little bit of attention to Mike Gallagher, who is the congressman who put forward this bill. So let's hear what Mike Gallagher had to say, and let's see. Maybe I'll be convinced. I've already watched the video, but maybe I'll find myself convinced, or maybe I'll just make a good argument on why he's dead wrong.
So we have now come together. We have 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans to introduce a bill that would prohibit TikTok from operating in the United States unless it severs its ties to ByteDance or any other entity controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. This is not a step that Republicans and Democrats are taking lightly. For months, we have studied this issue. We've listened to warnings from every major national security official in the Biden administration, the FBI director, most recently in front of our committee, the CIA director, the NSA director, the DNI, et cetera, et cetera. And now is the time to act. And
okay, so let's stop right here. So he's like, man, we've listened to everybody. All these people in government have told us that government needs to do something about this, right? Now, how often do they get on television and they say the exact opposite? How often do they get up there and say, I had this bill, I put it out there, and it turns out that the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, all these guys, they said, you know what? Yeah, you don't really need that. We good. They've never said that. They always say it. So this is not a mark of validity. He's like validating this bill. He's like, well, all these agencies who always say yes for more government, they said we need more government. So clearly we need more government. Like, this is bananas. Like, of course they're going to say that. It's in their interest, because the moment that you ban this, you give them something more to do. They have a vested interest in this, and it's not because, oh, they're tasked with security and they've got a vested interest because this is vital because they haven't described, and you'll see that they don't describe any actual issue like, hey, this has happened and it caused us a whole lot of a whole bunch of additional work, and we could have stopped that. That might be an argument for a bill. Right? Think of it this way. Imagine that there was a problem that like we'll take the CIA. Imagine the CIA comes forward with a report and they say, so it turns out we've been studying what ByteDance and the CCP has been doing or learning from TikTok. And here's what they've done, and here's how it's impacted America negatively. And in order to counter that, we had to do these things and expend all these resources. That's not what's happening, right? And that might actually be an argument. I don't know that I would buy that argument per se, but that could be an argument in favor of it, saying like, look, things have actually happened. We actually had to spend resources in order to protect Americans. And here's the report on everything that played out. And here's how we did it. And so given that, it seems like we probably want to ban this so that we don't have to continue spending resources in this manner in order to protect Americans, right? That would be an argument. And they're not doing that. They're saying, well, okay, this thing might happen. This thing that we're not going to tell you what the thing is, just something. Something might happen. They could gather information. But again, here he's like, well, these people who always want more power have told us we should have more power. Surprise. Let's keep going.
We've heard from them is that TikTok, under its current ownership structure, is a threat to U.S. national security.
Okay, so the question is how? How is it a threat to national security? You have to. I mean, if you're not going to tell us, I'm not going to believe you. What's that saying by Christopher Hitchens? It's that which can be presented without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, right? That applies here. He has provided no evidence for this, so therefore, American people, we can dismiss it and say, you know what? Until you cough up some information, we're not interested. No bill. And we will throw you out if you vote yes on this.
Before we open up the floor to questions and for other members to speak, I want to just quickly address Americans who might have some concern about this bill.
Okay.
Whether you're a mom worried about your kid.
Okay. So I think this is great. He's like, look, let me address American concerns. Like, imagine I'm a TikTok user and I'm like, dude, you're not telling me about this, how it's going to affect national security, but maybe you can tell me how this is going to affect me as a user. So let's hear what he has to say.
Kids on social media in general, or TikTok in particular, or you are a college student who uses the app to connect with friends, or you're an aspiring influencer. I would say this: if you value your personal freedom and privacy online, if you care about Americans' national security at home, and yes, even if you want TikTok to stick around in the United States, this bill offers the only real step toward each of those goals.
Okay. No, it doesn't actually, because we already have TikTok. People already use it. The bill actually limits things because it says, like, look, if you don't do this, if you don't sell off TikTok, if you don't, to somebody that's, that is not under control of the CCP, if you don't do this, then TikTok will be banned. But he's totally lying. TikTok already is available to people. They're already using it. He hasn't addressed any concerns. He just said, "Hey, if you care about American security and you care about your privacy and all these other things, then you need to support my bill, which will force TikTok to sell itself to somebody else that we like." That's all that he's saying. Like, he's not, this bill doesn't benefit, if you're that college student who's an aspiring influencer, this bill does not benefit you because he hasn't said how TikTok is harming you in the first place. He's only said national security, which is like, the federal government loves to say two things when it comes to legislation. They love to say national security, or they love to say uh, um, when it's over the states. I'm drawing a blank. Give me a second. Commerce. They like to it's related to interstate commerce. That's how they are. The federal government is a two-trick pony: interstate commerce and national security. And they rarely ever tell you actually how it plays out, because you can't argue with them. Like, it's national security. Okay, well, how? We can't tell you the details. Well, then why should I believe you? If you can't tell me how this is a matter of national security, then there's no reason for me to believe you. Again, that which can be presented without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. I don't have to provide any evidence for saying, you know what? I think you're wrong. I think you're lying. I think you're just making stuff up. Right. But again, don't be fooled, TikTok users. He isn't saying anything meaningful here. All he's saying is support my bill. That's it. That's all he's saying. He hasn't told you exactly how you're being harmed currently and how this bill will stop that harm, because it's not happening.
Let me explain why. TikTok is based in China. In China, there is no such thing as a private company. The ruling authority, the Chinese Communist Party, and its leader, Xi Jinping, have their hands deep in the inner workings of the company.
Okay. He hasn't said anything that we don't already know. Everybody knows this. We're very familiar with how China operates. No surprise here, right? All he said is there's a business over there with people that we don't like, doing things that we don't like. And he's not saying the quiet part, which is things that we kind of already do ourselves. Remember the Twitter files?
With devastating consequences for our own personal freedoms. And in compliance with Chinese law, TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is legally required to support the work of the Chinese Communist Party. And under ByteDance ownership structure, the Chinese government has the ability to manipulate TikTok's algorithm, surveil its users, and conduct influence operations that quietly populate Americans' For You pages.
Okay. All he's doing is, this is the 2024 version of the Red Scare. That's all it is. Oh my God, commies, what are they going to do? They're going to, they're coming for you. We got to root out all the communists. That's all it is. There is nothing of substance here. He's just telling you, like, things that we kind of already know. The CCP has They have control over any company in China, and they can do whatever they want. And they could say, well, we're gonna change up the algorithms so that it's more friendly to China, and Americans will have to see all this Chinese friendly, propaganda. Okay, well, it's not much different than what's happening now. Everybody knows now. Like, I log on to Twitter and I see what Twitter wants me to see. That's what I see, not necessarily what I want, right? Because what I would want as a Twitter user, what I would want, the most important thing that Elon Musk could offer me is a little button that says, um, "I want to see any tweets from people that I follow within the last 12 hours." Right? I could log off. I don't have to stay on Twitter all day long, like half of us do. Right? I could log off and I could come back in a few hours and I could say, show me what I've missed in the last few hours from people that I follow. And that would be great on Facebook, but neither one of them offer that. Both of them, and that this goes for any social media, they show you what they think you want to see. And the algorithms are not they're not controlled by me. I'm not really seeing what I want to see on any of them. So, whether it's the CCP or whether it's Twitter or whether it's, the FBI kind of, talking to Twitter on the side as they did in the past and saying, hey, maybe these things don't need to pop up in people's feeds, regardless of what it is. I am on no social media. Am I seeing explicitly what I want to see in the first place? All right, let's continue.
This is a problem because TikTok isn't just an app for funny dance videos. It is increasingly a news source for Americans under the age of 30 and allowing a
Okay, so that is the core of the problem. Remember a moment ago when I said that I saw somebody tweet out, is the problem that China is control of it or that the US government isn't? That's the problem. The US government wants to be in control of this.
CCP controlled entity like TikTok to become the dominant media player in America would be like if in 1962, at the height of the Cold War, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis, we'd allowed Pravda and the KGB to purchase the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, and NBC. But, and this is crucial, there is a path forward for TikTok.
Okay, so let's back up here because, analogies are a funny thing. When we talk about analogies, a lot of times, people get caught up in a one-to-one, like, oh, that's not exactly right. Right. And that's what makes analogies end up being no good. But in this particular case, I think he's wrong. He's like, well, this would be like if we allowed these other countries to buy like the New York Times. No, that's not the same. CCP didn't come over here and buy Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. That's not what happened. Somebody in China created TikTok and American users found it and they decided they liked it. That's the difference. It's a huge difference. It is Americans seeking out a product that they like. That's what it is. This isn't and it started out as funny dance videos. And it became as in users started engaging on it, they started giving their opinions on different things and saying, "Hey, here's what I dug up. Here's this information," so on and so forth. So it has slowly become an app that people get their news media from, but it's not how it started. So no, it is absolutely not the same thing. This isn't a one to, this isn't me, nitpicking at something that's not a one-to-one comparison. This is me saying it's absolutely entirely different. It's different. Again, let's repeat that. It is different because the New York Times was a or is an established news outlet that it was created here in the United States by Americans and grew big. And it grew big because a lot of people liked the information that they were getting from it. On the other hand, TikTok is a social media app that initially started out as funny videos. We all remember that. We remember seeing, you when you first were seeing TikTok videos become popular, that's what we saw. It was like people doing funny dance videos. It's one of the reasons why I refused to get on there in the first place. One, obviously, because, well, I guess it's not so obvious, but one, because I just don't have time. I can't afford with my time any more social media apps. It's already overwhelming enough. But kind of more importantly, every time I saw a TikTok video, it was somebody doing something funny, and I was like, I'm not a funny guy. Like, there's no way I'm going to match that. So it kind of was like a second reason for me not to get on TikTok, right? And that's how it started. But now we're starting to see more and more TikTok videos where people are talking about ideas and news and and opinions and these kind of things. And so it has grown into that. But it has grown into that because that's what the users are enjoying. They're liking it. So again, this is not China coming over here and buying an existing media outlet and then the US government saying, "Whoa, wait a minute here." Right? Like they started their own, Americans decided they liked it. Period. And so what he's trying to do is restrict Americans from something that they prefer. They like it. A lot of people under 30 maybe prefer TikTok to Twitter or Facebook. And I wouldn't be surprised if at least Facebook, maybe Twitter, I could give them a little bit of a pass. Elon is showing a little bit more stamina than we typically see from these big companies. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Facebook, in some way, is behind the scenes influencing this legislation, because this would be good for Facebook, right? Like, think about it. Facebook is struggling, and what better way to fight the struggle than to get the government to ban your competitor unless they sell it off. And who would they sell it off to? Hmm, I don't know. Anyway, let's continue.
As outlined in our bipartisan bill, if TikTok is completely divested by CCP controlled ByteDance, if there is a separation, the app can remain in the United States. Through this bill, we want to ensure divestment, not censorship. If an entity other than a CCP controlled entity owns TikTok, Americans can still share whatever content they like, no matter how.
Okay, so stop right there. That's actually not true. 100% lie. He said Americans can share whatever information they like if TikTok divests itself, if they basically sell it off so that it's controlled by, so that it doesn't have the control mechanism by the CCP. But that's actually not true because Americans already are sharing information that they like, information from an app that happens to be owned by a Chinese company that, yes, is under legal authority by the CCP and could be influenced by the CCP. But Americans are already sharing information that they like. If it's forced to sell to another company, then that's going to change how TikTok works. And that's going to change the type of content that's on TikTok that Americans are presently sharing. That's not true. He's trying to limit what Americans can share. But again, I get it. It's China. Everybody's like, "Oh man, China, they're bad folks," right? No argument there, right? At least the not the Chinese people necessarily, but the CCP. I get that point. However, we need to recognize that so far, I'm 3 minutes into him making an argument for his own bill to restrict this app. And at no time has he said what is actually happening to Americans right now. He's made speculation and he's made this weird argument like, if you care about freedom, you're going to support this bill that's going to limit the type of access that you have because that's freedom.
How bad the dance moves may be. But instead of being fed whatever the opaque Communist Party controlled algorithm dictates, Americans will then have real freedom of thought and expression.
Okay. Real freedom of thought means that you don't get to dictate who owns the source for the thought that I'm getting. That's real freedom of thought. That means I can use it if it comes from China. And even if China has said we're only going to show things that are sympathetic to China, to the CCP, we're only going to allow sympathetic videos about us for Americans to watch. Americans are still making the choice and saying, you know what? I think I would like to see that. Right. But what he's doing is he's saying, no, 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 you don't get to make that choice. We make it for you. We'll decide what's a national security risk. We'll decide what is freedom to you. And that freedom means this company has to be owned by by a company that's not Iran, North Korea, China, or let's see, Iran, North Korea, or Russia. Those were the four countries. All right, let's finish up his argument in favor of his
And for
bill.
TikTok's users, employees, and investors, I would submit this bill provides the only path for the app to continue its operations in the United States.
Okay, so no, it doesn't. This is not the only path. The other path is the bill doesn't get passed and things continue on as they are. That's also a path. So he's just totally BSing you. And this is what Congress does. Like they're just making stuff up. They're like, oh, this is the only path. What do you mean the only path? It's not currently banned. That's a path. The path, the other path is to leave it alone. That's it. That's the other path. And let Americans decide whether or not they want to utilize an app that is potentially under control by the CCP and influenced, specifically for Americans. And they may very well be. I'm not arguing that they're not. I'm just simply saying that as an American, real freedom means that if I want to read CCP news and that's the only source that I want to get my news from, well, then the US government doesn't get to decide otherwise. That is the freedom. But instead, the US government is trying to make this lousy argument and say, well, we need to decide the scope of what is permitted for you. And then once we do that, you'll have real freedom. Well, it sounds like the US government has their own definition of freedom. And we need to tell them, no, that's not how it works. We decide what our freedom will be. The freedom of the people, for the people, by the people. But it sounds much more like the US government wants to be the one in control, which is weird because that's what they're arguing. They're saying, well, you can't have this app that's potentially dictated by the CCP. You can only use apps that are dictated by the US government. We may not influence, directly like CCP does. We'll just send the FBI in to kind of make subtle hints. And then later you find out through Twitter files. But we're totally about freedom. BS.
Without threatening Americans' online freedom, privacy, and security. We need this bill because we simply cannot allow an app controlled by our nation's foremost adversary and competitor to take over the American media landscape. We cannot place hearts and minds of the next generation of Americans in the hands of a communist aggressor. We must act, and I urge the rest of our colleagues in the House and the Senate and the executive branch to act now before it's too late. And with that, and with apologies for my extended remarks, I'll turn it over to the ranking member, Raja Krishnamurthy.
All right. So he said absolutely nothing. He told you no reason whatsoever why you should support this bill.